Have you ever wondered how certain managers and executives that you might have known or people in your life make that gut decision? Have you ever been in a group situation where it was very difficult to come to consensus because people simply weren't willing to do it? Have you looked across your career as a human being in relation to other people and asked the question, how am I different now as a decision maker in a complex organization in this particular time and space than, let's say, 2 decades ago when I was just coming out of school? Discernment is the method that underlies literally all ethical thinking. Neither a beast nor a god. Now, this comes directly from Aristotle's Politics. He was unable to live in society and has no need, not a nice to have, a must have, no need, because he is sufficient for himself. Autarky must be either a beast or a god. We human beings are somewhere in between these two extremes in our lives. We have the beast at the one end who fulfill their mission in their lives simply by sensing and acting and reacting and intuiting and building into their neural fabric all sorts of templates for making decisions. Then there's this notion of the god for the Greeks and in many, many religions, of an angel, something beyond the human being that doesn't have to worry about any of those things. Their values are given. They use them. We have to discover ours. We have to discover facts. We have to discover the way we feel about those facts. And Aristotle was making the extremely important point. Human beings are connected. We are relational. Connectivity links judgment of facts with our feelings about the facts. And our feelings are our values. And we get them through processes of self-appropriation. We make habits out of them, but we still have these seemingly opposed approaches in all of our decisions. What we're going to do just for the next few minutes is build an awareness of the different components of our decisions. Connectivity will be the cornerstone of those components as we discern how to make ethical decisions. But we got to be willing to do this. Willingness underlies everything. I can remember coming right out of school. I'm a philosophy major, undergraduate in classical languages. I'm also a card-carrying economist, so beware. I love my regression models. Well, who doesn't, honestly? Always about judgment of facts. I was coming right out of school, working for a company which doesn't exist anymore. It's been subsumed into the Chase empire of banking, JP Morgan Chase, that is. Another agglomeration of an aggregation of, and literally a higher viewpoint of how to do finance. Well, MHT, Manufacturers Hanover Trust Company, was the brainchild of Gabriel Hauge on the wealth management side, and John McGillicuddy on the hardcore, hard-nosed commercial industrial loan side, both international, both inside the money center called New York City. And they combined two separate cultures together. Why? Because they wanted to provide a new set of goods and services, new set of values for whatever markets might be available to them. And they actually had to get an act of Congress. Rules were involved here and protocols for sure. An act of Congress in order to allow their corporation to even exist. And here I am, quite wet-nosed, coming down the Jerome Avenue Express train onto Wall Street, getting off the train, navigating through the crowds. You got to understand, I'm not a New York City kid. I was kind of transplanted there from way upstate New York. Total cultural difference. I worked for a lender at 40 Wall Street. His name was Dick Proctor. I am thrown into the cauldron of commodity brokers and the lending and borrowing of securities associated with that business. Feelings? Feelings? Oh my gosh. They seem to run their whole business on feelings. Yeah, facts. They got facts. They got lawyers. They got accountants. They got people who did statistics. They had computers. The beginnings of the computer information age were deeply inside of everything they did. They were connected. And the thing I learned from the banking experience, I was a lousy lender, by the way. Dick Proctor shifted me over to the investigative team. I was very good at investigation. I guess that's my philosophy background. But I learned a lot about business. One of the most important things Dick Proctor told me to do is keep a journal, because you are going to come up against just about every type of person you can imagine. And they all do business differently, every single one of them. Fast forward several years later, self-appropriation. I'm involved in helping the international trading operations of Amoco and BP attempt to come together. This is a very complex organization. Transcultural is putting it mildly. The two major cultures that they were putting together were Chicago and London. Oh, with some Japan, Indonesia, Abu Dhabi, Geneva thrown in for adjacent. Very, very, very different cultural expressions. And what Dick Proctor had taught me in banking, that I observed in so many other venues, including the venue of trading operations. And I ended up being involved with trading operations, it seems, through a lot of my career. So it's always in the back of my mind. Trading is a link, and that's how BP looks at trading still. And that's partly because of the approach taken by Sir John Brown. Now, why did he take that approach? He found a way to connect the time and space of the upstream to the downstream value chain of oil to a very wide variety of providers and users. Time and space, built up a complex organization, built habits within the corporation, and they were entirely transcultural. But his point was, in the end, you, the person, are the responsible entity. That's what made it work. Well, another movement forward after that lovely experience. I worked with engineers at a company that had made everything from golf carts to ICBMs, rockets, and probably inspired putting a sports car in space or your brother in space. And I learned the value of heuristics and algorithms. These are engineers, hardcore engineers, but they had not just a standard and a duty of care. They had processes. This is cognition. They knew how to make really good, systemically sound, engineering sound, cost-effective, meeting safety and health and environmental goals as they existed at the time. One crew that I worked with, they made helicopters. So I was just in the lunchroom talking with them about helicopters of all things. And the helicopters, there was a major accident. Helicopter smashed into a mountain. These people were practically crying. It was their product. They cared. Now, they weren't liable, but they felt liable. They built that feeling directly into the design of everything they made. They took it personally. Very strong attitude. They didn't say, oh, that's somebody else's problem. No, they saw a problem and they had a culture of, you see a problem, you try to solve it. You then connect with as many persons with different values and possibly from different cultures to make that solution actually work. That's the heuristic. Yes, they built algorithms. They simulated everything under the sun. The compute power on their computers were just phenomenal. Number of teraflops that they would consume in doing engineering simulations to find out what if they had this integrity, this value of integrity worked into a habit of always simulating until we're done. They wouldn't let the product out the door unless they were done. That was amazing. Amazing to watch, amazing to listen to, and amazing to appropriate into my own business decision-making and personal decision-making. Ethics. Ethics are many methods that exist out there. You get the textbook out, you get Immanuel Kant and his rule-based deontological ethics, which is probably as much inspired by the Greeks as anything else. But ethics has consequences. Now you're talking to the economist. That's John Stuart Mills. That's Jeremy Bentham. That's maximization of utility subject to various constraints. The theory of the second best, the Leon Valrock. It goes on and on and on. And it guides an awful lot of policy making and decision making inside of complex organizations like the federal government, like the United Nations. And beyond consequentialism, outcomes only, maximization, minimization, economics, basically. There are behavior-based approaches. So we put everything into the behavioral mix master and come out with the decision. Now, is it ethical or not? I don't know. I think a lot of decisions are behavior-based, consequentially based, and are subject to rules and frameworks. Certainly the entire legal decision-making framework is that way. Compliance is certainly that way. But we use rules as templates, as frameworks within which we have agreed to operate. There's kind of like a theory of justice inside of all of this too. And businesses are part of that. But the thing that seems to link it all together for me has always been the notion of virtue. Virtue as a method. But the method behind virtue is the most important part. That's self-appropriation. What are the strengths? What are the excellences that we have in our business, with ourselves inside of the complex of businesses that we actually operate, the business of our whole household, the business of our whole life, the organization of it, the governance of it. We are the model. That's what this ends up being. We are the model. We are the responsible individuals. That's what makes it ethical. That's the ethos. We are the model. We're the ones who have to transcend our current situation to make a new situation. That's why we put joint ventures together. Same kind of idea. But we are neither beasts nor gods. We're always discovering. We're always taking into ourselves and growing to the next step. And we do this through a process of self-appropriation that I'm also going to call simply discernment. And it comes out of the way we experience, understand, judge, and then make decisions. That's the basic heuristic, all guided by values, which can be transcultural. You might want to pause just for a couple of minutes for yourselves and go, my God, my head is exploding. Most people, yeah, that's true. This is an awful lot to put in just a few minutes. Recall a recent group decision at your place of business. Let's keep it simple. Attend to the setting, gravity of the issue, how important it was for the group, your feelings as you have gone through the decision process itself, and your knowledge of the situation. Knowledge here is about judgments of fact and value now. Knowledge is judgment in the end. How did this happen? Facts, whole history of it. And some opposing opinions. It's a dialectic piece. You have a dialogue, putting one thing against the other and resolving them with a new thing. Very transcendent, aren't we, human beings? Yes. But there's also knowledge of each individual and then the group consensus. Feelings represent the values we hold, which are ultimately habitual. Everybody comes to that meeting autobiographically. And then the group itself has almost an autobiography of how it approached the problem. So there are two kinds of data. And why is this why is this ethical at all? Because of that. We're not just judging facts, we're also judging values and using them to result in actions. Reality is about actions. You're going to have all sorts of mental things going on and in the group, but if you don't write it down, act on it, write the check, release the resources, it's a big so what. So think about that for a minute. And we'll come back to some really interesting stuff. Put a little bit more color in our lives here. The 3T problem. Tin, tantalum, and tungsten. I mean, these are part and parcel of just about every piece of electronics that we have in the world, and we depend upon them entirely. That satellite, for example, that's transmitting messages from a site to your computer, the computer itself, the phone you have, the medical equipment we use, that's a ventilator, all controlled digitally using semiconductors. Now, what do you have to put into a semiconductor? Well, I'm not going to talk about cobalt here because that's why your phone is so heavy. But basically, tantalum, for example, the Ta in the periodic table, comes from that picture. The guy with the gun making sure people who are often um, in debt slaves, often other situations, in places like the Democratic Republic of the Congo at Kinshasa, old Zaire, old Belgian Congo. They mine this. They mine it by hand. Thousands of people die in these mines. Now, leave that off for just a moment. But that's where we get our tantalum from. And without tantalum, we don't have the conductivity needed for circuits, among other things. And tin is, SN, is replacing lead solder in those same circuits. And tungsten, strongest thing around. It's in your ailerons and elevators and rudders of every plane. Very, very strong, lightweight metal. Tantalum is used also for those sorts of things. Now, that's as far as my high school chemistry background can get me. But I've worked with engineers at places that deal with this day to day. And then the ore is a seed separated from the overburden, the sandstone that's around it, sent to places like China and Australia, for example, for smelting. At that point, the ore is totally untraceable, by the way. You don't know where it's coming from. You don't know if some guy with a gun is pointing at some people who are enslaved. You have no idea. Or it's a fair trade situation. And then that rare earth that's been processed is further processed into a product. So that's the situation. That's the situation with rare earths in general. And you can see how all things are connected. The world is completely connected. This on, gave away everything. Here's the rub. Children are forced into that slavery. Bad enough for slavery, but it's child-based. How do you like that? Your child is forced into slavery at a gunpoint. Parents feel forced to sell their children into slavery in order that you can have a phone. Me, in order that I can use this computer. Right? There's a feeling going on here. This feeling was so strong at Intel. Carolyn Duran, working in the sustainability group, PhD in material sciences. This is right up her alley, right?